I'm waiting for the cue that we're live. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our February webinar. We are so excited to have you here. Happy Black History Month. We celebrate Black history every day, but happy Black History Month that the rest of the country acknowledges. Happy Valentine's Day. Love is in the air. We hope everyone is feeling the love. We certainly want to send you love this morning. And we are just so excited about the conversation we're going to have this morning with two dynamic women who are fighting for prison reform, for fair sentencing, fighting to get people who have been unfairly sentencing pardoned and out of jail. And we're just going to hear some really fascinating stories about their work and their success. And I can't wait to get to it. But first, I just wanted to share something that's premiering tonight. Hopefully you've seen the promos about a 4-part docuseries called Profile the Black Man. As you know, one of MOBB United's key pillars is changing perceptions of Black males from negative to positive, or at least to more accurate and not all negative. So we're excited that Discovery and OWN have decided to do this 4-part series. It's executive produced by Tina Knowles-Lawson. We know her as Mama Tina, Beyonce's mama. So she is invested in this and gotten behind it in a big way. And we just want everyone to support it. It's airing exclusively on Discovery Plus, which is a streaming platform. So you have to sign up for Discovery Plus. I'm told you can get a 7-day free trial to check it out, which I'll be doing for the premiere tonight. But they're going to be covering a lot of the things we've been talking about in this organization. Part 1 focuses on the myth that Black men are dangerous. Part 2 focuses on the myth that Black men are absent fathers. Part 3 focuses on the myth that Black men devalue Black women. And Part 4 focuses on the myth that Black men don't cry or shouldn't cry. So they're really covering a broad spectrum of issues that are important for us to wrestle with. So we just want to show you the trailer promoting the series. Beth, if we can roll that.
Black men are beautiful.
Black men are magnificent.
Black men are innovators.
Black men are brilliant.
Compassionate.
Intelligent.
Complex.
Resilient.
Critical.
Necessary.
Warriors.
Everything.
Cosmic, supernatural, cool. I've always felt the perception of who we are is filtered through a lens of fear.
Still to this day, Black men are not able to just walk down the street without someone assuming that they don't belong there.
Stereotypes that have been put on Black men takes place in the newspaper headlines. It takes place on the television, and I think it's played a major role in the bias against Black men. It's an atomic bomb.
It's every day for us. Every single day.
Put your hands out the window!
That's the narrative. I felt threatened. I felt afraid. If they got on handcuffs, they're still a threat because they're a Black man.
Black men are not a threat.
Black men portrayed as dangerous has been inside of the fabric of American culture from the beginning.
Young Black boys in America, we don't get a chance to be kids for a long time. There's no room to emote with the exceptions of anger.
Society would have you think that we don't love and really rock with our queens like that, and we do.
Most Black fathers are in the home. Well over 50% is a shocker to many people.
We are all living through a very painful time, and we must be able to talk about that.
Wow, that is such a compelling piece. I am looking forward to watching it. Good morning, everyone. I'm Vanessa McCullers, and I am a proud member, and I'm one of the leaders of Moms of Black Boys United and MOBB United for Social Change. That piece that we just saw, Dipelsha, is so compelling simply because one of the things that we have always fought for is changing the perception of our Black men, our young Black boys. I mean, I just can't imagine. I'm so glad to see something now come to the forefront on TV where people can watch it, the masses can watch it and see and feel what our Black men go through. And I'm excited that we have an opportunity this morning to share what our Black women and our Black moms and moms of Black boys go through when facing, the prison system and the disparity that we're seeing and that we have seen for years in the criminal justice system. With that, I would love to introduce our guests this morning. We have got Karen Morrison, and Karen Dickson-Morrison, I am so apologetic, was born in Kingston, Jamaica, yard gal like me, whoop, whoop, and moved to the Bronx, very similar to me as well, and has been a resident of Virginia for 30 years. In 2014, Karen discovered her passion for justice when she found out that a dear friend of hers was serving life in prison for a first-time drug offense. She advocated for his release, and in 2016, President Obama granted him clemency. Karen advocated for the release of other men and women through the dedication and service, assisted with their release as well. Karen continues to advocate for people serving long and lengthy service sentences in federal and state prisons. And with Karen today, we have Lawrence Stevens. Lawrence was 18 years old when he was sentenced to 1,823 years. I read that right. If I messed up, let me just say it again so it penetrates. 1,823 years for home invasion. After spending 20 years in prison, Governor Ralph Northam granted him a conditional pardon on December 17th in 2021. Lawrence was released from prison January 12th, 2022. Welcome home, Lawrence. During Lawrence's incarceration, he worked on himself, obtaining his GED and completing numerous programs. He would like to give back to the community by mentoring young people going down the wrong path. And he plans to start an at-risk center for youth and incorporate boxing and academics, which are so important. And last but certainly not least, we have with us this morning the amazing Nadia Fisher. In 2014, Nadia established Incarceration Relief Resource Center, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to faith and community-based interventions for offender reentry programs. IRRC is a nationwide social justice advocacy organization with the mission to reduce incarceration and improve outcomes for system-involved offenders. IRRC assists offenders to successfully re-enter their communities by helping to provide housing, employment, education, access to effective mental health, chemical dependency, primary care treatment services, government assistance and programs, and of course, spiritual correctedness. To date, Nadia has been the conduit release of 116 returning citizens. That's a great number. 116 returning citizens with zero recidivism. Another significant aspect of Nadia's contribution is her advocacy and public relations work on behalf of mothers of murdered sons. She was the catalyst for the relevancy for Mothers of the Movement, a group formed to campaign with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in support of her candidacy for President of the United States and advocate for an end to senseless acts of violence. This group of mothers include Sabrina Fulton, mother of Trayvon Martin, Geneva Reed Veal, Sandra Bland's mother, Gwen Carr, Eric Garner's mother, Maria Hamilton, Dontre Hamilton mother, Congresswoman Lucy McBath, Jordan Davis's mother, and so many others that I can personally attest to for social justice reform involving police and African-American citizens, especially Black males. As the chair of the Cincinnati NAACP Prison Branch Committee, Nadia is charged with extending community and educational resources to returning citizens, as well as emotional encouragement to support hurting, brokenhearted moms of incarcerated sons. The emotional aftermath of incarceration is so often overlooked by the judicial system and the public when families lose their loved ones to the system. So Nadia's goal is to raise global awareness of the silent cries and the deep emotional trauma experienced by the population that she serves. my wonderful guests. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I'd love to start off by asking you all to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you get involved in this important work. And I'm going to kick it off with you, Karen. Thank you so much.
Again, thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be speaking with mothers of Black boys and Delisha, I'm sorry, that's a Jamaican, and Vanessa. Thanks for having me. I got involved in this work probably in 2014. I was a school teacher and just trying to figure out what was the purpose that I was going to have in life, because I just felt like I was losing my kids. I saw them going through the criminal justice system and decided I needed to take a break. And so in that time period, a very dear friend of mine, I reached out to him via Facebook, and I was so surprised because I had no idea that he was incarcerated. And when I found out he was incarcerated, I sent him a letter. And in the letter, I asked him, like, what's going on? Why are you in prison? And he told me that he was incarcerated for 16 life sentences for first-time nonviolent drug offense. And I was like, no way. Tell me, who did you kill? What building did you blow up? Because I couldn't imagine a Black man in prison for 16 life sentences for first-time nonviolent offense. And so I say that we embarked on this incredible journey. And as I was going through it, I learned a little bit about law, learned about conspiracy cases. I also was able to reach out to congressional people. And around 2014, 2015, we found an attorney by the name of Brittany Barnett who decided to take his case. And within 9 months of her filing a clemency, she was able to win his release. And his name is Corey Jacobs, and Corey is actually out now. He is a senior advisor to Sean Combs, and he's doing extremely well. And I was just really happy to be able to be on that journey. But once Corey was released, I felt a void again. And I was like, okay, I really want to be able to help, people that's incarcerated. And so in 2017, I picked up another case with a gentleman by the name of Deshaun Dye. He was 17 years old. He accidentally shot his friend, and he was sentenced to 15 to life. So when you think of a sentence of 15 to life, well, why are you still in there at 21 years? And so we decided, okay, well, let's try to figure out how we can get you out of prison. And the very first thing that I did was I filed the Freedom of Information Act and realized that there was a witness at the crime scene that nobody even knew about that said it was an accident. So we raised funds and we were able to pay for an attorney that took his case. And now he's actually in front of a judge waiting to have a retrial. And fast forward, I started a nonprofit organization called Fighting for Freedom. And Lawrence Stevens, I'm so happy that he's here today. He was one of my very first case that him and I decided to do. We co-wrote an addendum to a pardon that was already filed. And the success is Lawrence walked out of prison on January the 12th. In the same year, between 2021, 2022, we filed many pardons. And we started to help people with parole and parole eligibility in Florida, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And in 2021, 2022, we won a release of 13 people.
Wow.
And so we're excited about that. People serving life sentences. And I just have to put the disclaimer, I'm a non-attorney. So I feel really good about the work that we're doing, because as an advocate, to be able to get 13 people out of prison in just 1 year is tremendous work. And I appreciate everyone's support who's always supported me. So thank you again for having me.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Karen. And yes, it is indeed amazing work, awesome work, and very important work. And we'll get back to talking a little bit about you and Lawrence, further on in this discussion. I'd love for Nadia to share just a little bit about herself. We're definitely going to dive a little deeper into the work that you both have done. But if you could please, Nadia, share a little bit about yourself and how you started down this path.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you and good morning to everyone. I would be so remiss if I did not, one, acknowledge Dickson Magruder, my birthday twin and the founder of MOBB United, as well as you, Vanessa, for your leadership and, one, creating these platforms for individuals like myself and Karen and Lawrence, for us to be able to share our journey and talk about this important work. But I also would be remiss if I did not quote something from the founder, Dickson Magruder, as she recently stated, as we kicked off Black History Month, which is every day today is Black history for us. As she states, and I quote, "Slavery is white history. How we survived it is Black history. All of it is American history," which is so relevant to this conversation because prison is a form of modern day slavery. Yes, it is. As I stated, I am Nadia Fisher. At the age of 8 years old, and my very young, impressionable mind has been sitting in prisons since, that's all I can remember. I firsthand witnessed my brother be sentenced as a nonviolent offender for 20 years for being as what they call as an accomplice to a crime. I saw with my young eyes mass incarceration form in front of my eyes. Every weekend for 10 years, I sat in this prison and I watched my brother literally just melt away. It zombified him. My mother, she sustained a mental breakdown because of it. Our family, our Black family, we became so divided. We didn't know what to do. This was also new to us. And also it affected my community. I'm starting to see more of my friends, their family members were being incarcerated. And it just kind of just opened my eyes. It was such a huge awakening. I said, what is going on? I'm looking in this prison and I'm seeing more people that look like me. I said, this is a problem. And I remember asking a question to my brother at the age of 8. I said, David, is this where they send bad people? I said, because it just looks like warehousing. This is not it, but why are they locking us up? And it takes me back to, we think about drug offenses. They put the drugs in our community, then they locked us up for selling them, which made no sense to me. And so as being a young, impressionable mind, as I started to grow up, I've always been a why person. Why are these things happening? So more and more, I started reaching in and, doing more research and finding out, understanding what is going on. Then the crack epidemic happened. And then at the age of 17, I felt like I had a little bit more voice, even though I was very green, not understanding that legislation is what rules the nation. I marched right into the governor's office in Lansing, Michigan. I said, hey, I met a guy in prison and he shouldn't be there. It just, some things about this isn't right. And they're like, that's not how it works. But long story short, the governor actually heard my cry. That individual, Leroy, is out today. He's very successful. He's doing amazing. He's an amazing grandfather. He's a productive citizen in society. And I'm so glad that I was his voice because, as we all know, those that are incarcerated, their voices are stolen. And so here I am today. I like to move behind the scenes. I don't like the optics because it kind of detracts me from doing the work. It's important work. It's necessary work. There's a lot of us that are still incarcerated for excessive sentencing, as well as those that are for wrongful convictions. For me, I work from the national level, whether it be state or federal, which is all important work, and I don't discriminate. However, it is my responsibility as being Black that I will continue to fight for my people who are most affected in this penal system. And again, I thank all of you for allowing me to have my voice and utilize your platform to be able to deliver this important work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Thank you so much. You're absolutely right in terms of it's so important that we lead this work and lead this conversation, focusing on how this affects our Black men and our young Black men. The statistics share with us that Black Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. And what that looks like is that nationally, 1 in 81 Black adults in the United States is serving time in state prison right now. Let's break that down a little bit more into how it affects, because this is a national organization and we are on a national platform, but we do know that, you attack these things from a state perspective as well. In 12 states, more than half of the prison population is Black. That's in Alabama, in Delaware, in Georgia, Illinois, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, Mississippi, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. In 12 states, more than half the population. In 7 states, they maintain a Black-white disparity that is greater than 9-1. California, Connecticut, Iowa, Maine, Minnesota, New Jersey, and Wisconsin. Those numbers are staggering. And that's not to leave out our brown brothers and sisters as well. where Latinx individuals are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate of 1.3 times the incarceration of whites. Ethnic disparities are highest in Massachusetts. And that is pretty much 4-to-1 ratio. These stats that I'm sharing with you are coming from findings from the NAACP criminal report. That's something that we can share with you, but I had to share those stats with you because they are unbelievable. That's on paper though, that's black and white. Let's talk about how it affects the person. And I know, Nada, you've worked with so many people. Can you share with us some of the findings that you have seen on a personal level of how the system affects Black boys and men?
Absolutely, I can. One case in particular, a young man by the name of Darnell Williams. Darnell, may he rest in peace. He has passed on since my actual engagement with him. When I first met Darnell, he came to me through another resource that I had helped a few years prior. I could just my conversation with him, I could just tell he was suffering from mental health illness. And I think that was the eye opener for me, that I needed to dive in a little bit deeper and understand not only were they being incarcerated for crimes, but none of the crimes they weren't even considering, meaning the law officials weren't even considering these individuals have mental health issues. Was incarceration necessarily the answer? And so after maybe 6 to 8 months of working with Mr. Williams, I learned that not only did the courts just brush him away and threw him away, they did not once tap into any of his psychiatric history, nothing. Incarceration only really heightened his problem. And so that kind of just forced me this is a call to action here. They're not only locking us up, but they're locking us up not even considering that we're ill. We're mentally sick. And that was a problem for me. And so after working with so many law officials over a course of 3 years, we were finally able to get Darnell home. However, when you think in terms of reentry, there weren't even mental health services available for him that he even could go into tap to. So to me, in my opinion, that was a trigger for what? Reoffending. So it was so many other aspects of not him just being incarcerated, but the fact that he had mental health illness. And there was no regard. And then also when he was incarcerated, he was constantly getting into trouble, as they state. There's no medications that they necessarily always give to the mentally health. And also too, there's no mental health counseling, if you will. So many of those programs are either non-existent, or they just don't even, there's no funding for it. So that kind of just brings us to another level of conversation, the mental health piece. Darnell Williams, unfortunately, he was murdered. His chemical imbalance was never treated. There were no resources for us. And unfortunately, he got into an altercation, he was killed. So you can imagine how that felt for me as an advocate, as a woman, and as a Black woman, that I feel like I couldn't necessarily help him fully. Now, would that be deemed a success because he was brought home? Yes, it could be. However, he was not re-entered successfully where he could still be alive today. And I think that if the court officials would have dived in deeper and there was more assessment on his mental health, I believe that Mr. Williams would be alive today.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, Nadia. I know that is a extremely personal and painful story, but it's important. It's important that we have these discussions and share these stories because others need to understand how important it is as we're fighting for our rights to fight for those who aren't heard. And this is exactly what this is when our Black men are incarcerated, they are not heard. They need us to fight for them. And speaking of fighting, I know Karen, you've been doing this work for some time now. You've been fighting this for some time. Can you tell us some of the biggest cases that you've worked on and some that you're most proud of? I know Lawrence is here because he's been doing some great work with you. Please share a little bit with us about your work.
Okay, so what we decided to do when we formed Fighting for Freedom was we thought that we could just start off with people that were wrongfully convicted, because 49% of Black boys that are in prison are wrongfully convicted. And once we started to do the wrongful conviction, then people saying, well, what if I did commit the crime? Should I still stay 1,800 years in prison. And so we kind of branched off a little bit and started to do cases where people are actually guilty of the crime, but they're overly sentenced. And I just want to talk about a case that we are actively involved with. I met a young lady by the name of Liliana Gonzalez, who was pushing for justice for Lake Keith. Now, I'm not sure if a lot of people know about this story, but we're really trying to make it viral so that people can hear about it. So Lake Keith Smith is in Alabama, and him and a few friends were doing some home invasions. On one of the home invasions, they were coming out, the police was called, and a young man by the name of Adante Washington was shot and killed. And people just don't know that you can be charged for a murder even if you don't commit the murder. And so because a police officer shot Adante Washington and they were doing home invasions, Lake Keith was charged with the murder. And he's been in prison now for about, I think he's 7 years. He was 15 years old. He's now 22 years old, and he's charged with the shooting of his friend that a police officer did. So those are some of the cases that we're advocating for. And again, his advocate, Liliana Gonzalez, has done a remarkable job. And when we saw the story, we had to lock arms with her. And so we're literally pushing for Lake Keith to be given a new trial and resentenced and just come out, because he should not be in prison for first-degree murder. That's something that he didn't commit. And Lawrence Stevens, again, is one of my favorite cases, my best case, because when I started working with Lawrence, I found this brilliant man. And I asked him, I said, why don't you write your letter to the governor so that I can see, where we're gonna head with. And when he wrote the letter to the governor, I was like, he's gonna be free, because he talked about the experiences that he was having, the decisions, why he made the decision. But then we started to uncover some things that, in his case wasn't correct, because there's no way that someone should be in prison for a triple life plus 23 years and didn't kill anyone. And then because he was the age of 18, he was not eligible for parole. And so that was something that we talked about, and Lawrence will tell you more about his case when he gets the opportunity. But a lot of the successes that we have with fighting for freedom are guys that were 18 years old at the time of the crime, first-degree murder. They did commit the crime, but they were sentenced to life sentences. And while they've been incarcerated, they have completely rehabilitated themselves. And they have one guy, Stephon Jones, who we recently got parole, started a nonprofit organization, From Behind the Walls. I won a clemency case for a guy named Daryl Frazier, who was a first-time nonviolent drug offender sentenced to life. He had done 32 years, and President Trump granted him clemency, and he started a nonprofit organization called the Joe Johns Tennis Foundation, where while he was incarcerated, they were doing at-risk kids, teaching them tennis. And so, like you said, the Black men that are in prison are so brilliant, and nothing is going to stop them from doing the things that they need to do, even from behind the walls. But what we have to do as an organization is showcase their talents so that they can see, you shouldn't keep this Black man in prison when he will be an asset instead of being a burden to taxpayers. And since Daryl Frazier has been out, he has taken his tennis organization to even higher heights. He's winning grants and putting more things in place for kids. Not only are they teaching them tennis, but they're also helping with their academics. And so those are some of the success stories that we have, but all the guys that we represent, they are completely rehabilitated, and they're going to be wonderful assets to society. And we're just really happy that we have an opportunity to represent them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that leads us to talking with Lawrence. I know that you've shared a little bit about your work with him so far, Karen, but what I'd love for you to do is tell us exactly how you connected with Lawrence, and what was it, besides that ridiculous sentence that I just can't get over, what was it that made you decide that you needed to work with him, you needed to fight for him and advocate for him?
Yeah, so I had another guy by the name of Kevin Snodgrass, who is wrongfully convicted, and I was working on his case, and we're still trying to make progress with him. And so in the interim, and this is what I love about the guys that are behind the bars, because they're not selfish. And so Kevin told me about Lawrence's case, and Lawrence calls me. And when he calls me on the phone, and the first time that I spoke to him, I talked to him about, what was he doing in prison and the asset that he was. And Lawrence, from the first time that him and I started to communicate, and again, like I said, when he wrote me that letter, I just was like, you know what, this gentleman doesn't belong in prison. And so since my organization was just new and it was just me trying to do everything, I was like, Lawrence, can you help me with some of these support letters or these family letters or these guys' letters? And Lawrence started to write for me. And when he started to write, I was like, oh no, we got to get him out of prison. And in the interim, we developed a really good friendship where we started talking every single day. And Lawrence will tell you, I was sitting on his couch. And so, there was times that I just was having a hard time with some of the work that I was doing. I felt like overwhelmed. And sometimes I felt like, we had just gotten another denial and I couldn't understand because I went in there, the guy had done a really good job and they were stuck in prison. And Lawrence would be my sounding board to say, okay, you didn't get him this time, but you can get him next time. And he was just so encouraging to me. And the more that we got to know each other and the more that I saw this brilliance behind the walls, I was like, I had to get him out. And one thing that I will share about Nadia, I'm the same way. I went to the governor. And when I had an opportunity to meet the governor, I told him about Lawrence's story and the heartfelt situation where Lawrence will tell you why he got involved in this crime was something that I'm for. Later on in life, I'm probably one that don't believe in abortions. And so when Lawrence told me about the case that, he had gotten a girl pregnant and he did everything possible to bring life, it just made me realize that, this is a gentleman that I'm going to have to fight for because he sacrificed his own life for his daughter's life. And now he's in prison. And I just thought that was really remarkable. And that was what was laid on my heart to get this man out, because as a Black father, he was trying to do everything possible to protect the life of his daughter. And that's what compels me the most to get up every single day to fight for him to get him out of prison.
Thank you so much, Karen. Lawrence, I know I said it earlier. I don't live where you live, but I'm a Black woman. I'm a mother. I'm a mother of a Black son. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome you home again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, what happened to you is incredibly unfair. I use that word all the time. My friends will tell you, it's unfair, it's unfair. I say it all the time, but we know that life doesn't deal us the best deck all the time. But I want you to share with us, what are the cards that you got? What happened to you? How did you end up in this situation?
Good morning, first and foremost. Thank you for having me. Mothers of Black Boys is such an impactful and necessary organization. I thank you for having me to be here and talk, just share a little bit about my story. Well, I was raised in Hampton, Virginia. Like most guys, I was raised in a single parent home with my mother and my siblings. And, I didn't grow up in the, best areas, coming up, but my mother, she was a strong Black woman, like a lot of Black women, and she raised me and my siblings to be respectful, was raised in church, So my mother, she always tried to give us what we needed, not always what we wanted, but she made sure we always had what we needed. My father, he passed away when I was very young. And so I struggled a lot, having a real solid male figure in my home and in my life at the time. So I ventured off and I went into the streets. Unfortunately, a lot of the guys who was, in my neighborhood, doing things that, wasn't a good influence on myself and a lot of my friends. I looked up to them because I was missing that father figure in my life. So, I was always active and involved when it came to sports and stuff like that. Like sports was my passion, basketball, football, things like that. But it got difficult for me to keep up in school, my grades and all of that. So eventually, like I said, I veered off to the left, went out to the streets. And when I was 18 years old, my girlfriend, she was pregnant at the time. And we both was in a situation where, we just wanted to make a way for ourselves and my unborn child at the time. So, you know, the idea was proposed where I could you know, commit a robbery and possibly earn money to take care of me and my girlfriend at the time, my unborn child. And, you know, I jumped at the opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, it cost me my whole life in prison at the time. And gratefully, I was able to receive a pardon from the government, you know, and that to me was the best feeling ever. But, you know, I really want to go back to what Nadia was saying, you know, about the part about being in prison, because I think that's an important part that, you know, a lot of people miss out on, you know, coming out here into society. A lot of people always ask me about, you know, how did it happen? And they want to know what I'm gonna do from here. But the in-between part, you know, of me being in the actual prison setting and having to grow up in prison. I went to prison when I was 18 years old. I got out when I was 38. So I've spent over half of my life incarcerated. So, you know, I went through a lot of different changes, you know, like I said, growing up in prison, having a life sentence, a lot of times, you know, my perception of or the reality of what I was dealing with, it kind of triggered thoughts inside me where, you know, some days I woke up and I said to myself, you know, I didn't really want to live. I contemplated suicide a lot. I wondered, you know, if my life would have been different, you know, or things in my life had been different if I was given a lighter sentence. Like, what would I have been? What could I have been, become, you know, with my life? So a lot of times, you know, things just became, you know, so overwhelming for me that, you know, I started to just like, you know, lose myself. However, as I started to get older and I started to educate myself, you know, I learned that, you know, the strength of the mind is such a beautiful thing. So I started to learn the law. In 2017 was actually when I put together my part and I filed it. In 2020, like Karen said, I got with the brother Kevin and he gave me her information and me and Karen just started talking and we developed this beautiful bond where we could work together. And we was just, you know, fighting for the lives of other people in the midst of me waiting for my own pardon. So once I got the pardon, it really showed me that, you know, the education that I was able to attain when I was in inside of prison, it really paid off, you know. So once again, I'm just so humbled, you know, by the experience to be here. And just to know that, man, it's so many beautiful, strong Black women out there raising strong Black sons. And, you know, it's emotional to me right now because, you know, I lost my mother when I was in prison. And just to see so many, you know, Black women fight for brothers like us, man, because a lot of us, you know, a lot of brothers in the prison system, man, you know, a lot of the things that we want to say, it gets lost, you know, because we don't have the voice to speak and for people to hear what it is we feel and what we say when we behind bars. You know, I just 30 days ago, I had a life sentence and now I'm out living my life. You know, this was something that I never thought would happen again. So it's such a beautiful thing. And I feel extremely blessed just to be here.
And we feel blessed to have you here. We feel blessed to have you here. I want to applaud you for the strength you've had, the resiliency that you've had, the tenacity to not only pull yourself out of this, but also to turn around and use that strength to help others. I really, really want to applaud you for that.
Thank you so
There's
much.
some comments that are coming in here that I have to just share with you. And one said, be encouraged, Lawrence. Your strength and resiliency is amazing. And us as moms of Black boys, we welcome you home, nephew.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much.
I want to ask you, this is kind of tough because I'm trying to figure out, like, I'm glad that you learned about law while you were in there, and you're using this to help others. How did the system even get to the point where they sentenced you, how they gave you such a harsh sentence? Like, how did that even come about? Do you know the math behind it or the reasoning behind why you received such a harsh sentence?
Until recently, when the bill was passed where robbery was broken down into different classes. Before then, robbery, any kind of robbery, whether it was strong arm, whether you used a firearm, whether someone was even killed or hurt seriously during the time of the robbery, you could get, or you could receive 5 years to a life sentence. So actually, the judge, was in the guidelines of the law when he gave me the sentence, a life sentence. However, my pre-sentencing guidelines at the time was 13 years. And so these pre-sentencing guidelines are drawn up to give the judge, some type of guide, understanding of who the individual is that's standing in front of. Unfortunately, we run into people who are in authority, and I'm gonna just say it, they racist. They're racist, and they see me just like they see other little Black boys that come through the prison system or the court system, and they just look at us and they say, here goes another one, and they write us off. So that's what was done to me, and it's difficult, in my case, because I actually had another Black co-defendant, who was my best friend, and 3 other white co-defendants. So myself, I was given 1,823 years. My co-defendant, who was Black, was given 35 years, and he was 17 at the time of the crime. And the other 3 white co-defendants in my case was given up to 2 to 10 years. So we see the discrimination and the racism and everything and how it plays out in the court system, in the legal system, in many systems in this country. So like I said, I was able to take something that was supposed to have been a burden, and I was able to actually turn it into a blessing with the help of a lot of other people. So like I said, I'm just, I'm extremely blessed.
I'm blown away by the way you just broke down the sentencing for those that were involved in that scenario with you. I am blown away. I shouldn't be, because I understand that this is how it's always been. But every time I hear another story of, Black boys and Black men being incarcerated, and in cases where they are, they have co-defendants involved, and there is such a disparity in their sentencing, it breaks my heart. It reminds me, as a matter of fact, of something that I always used to tell my son when he was around 12 years old. I remember sharing with him, be careful who you hang out with. Careful, because, and we lived in a predominantly white neighborhood, right? And so all his friends were not Black. As a matter of fact, I don't think any of his friends were Black. And I used to tell him, you got to be careful who you hang out with, because if something goes down, they coming for you. You, the little Black boy, is who they're coming for. You're the one who's going to get in trouble. And I don't think, if I'm to take this a little broader, that moms of non-Black boys think in that way, warn their sons in that way, because it's a whole different world for them. And there is a huge lack of understanding of how different our worlds are. And I think I've always said, DePelsha and I've had this conversation, if moms of non-Black boys truly understood what we went through, maybe they would work just as hard with us to make sure that our sons, our daughters, our children in general are treated fairly. I just have to share that with you because it's something that just like, it burns me up. And on that note, I want to ask you, and thank you again for being here with us. I want to ask you, what advice do you have for our moms? Because we've got, I can't tell you how many moms are watching this right now, moms of Black boys. What piece of advice would you be able to give them as to how they can protect their sons, advise their sons that are incarcerated now? How can we help them preserve their life and get them out? If they're being sentenced unfairly, how can we help get them out?
I like to share this with you. I read somewhere before, it says that the mother is the child's first educator, and I think that's a beautiful piece, because when asking that question, I think that, it starts with the education, from the mother. And, what you said, it has so much truth in it about your son, him having white friends. And that's just the reality of the world that we live in. Like, Black mothers always have to have this conversation with their Black sons and even their Black daughters, about, how they should act if and whenever they encounter law enforcement and things like that. However, on the flip side, white mothers, and I've had this conversation with some of my white friends who are mothers of young white sons, and they say, they never in their life had to even fathom the thought of their sons or their daughters or children in general interacting with law enforcement and thinking about, how it could end, tragic, or have their sons locked up or whatever. So I thank you for sharing that, because that's very important for people to know. When it comes to our young Black boys being incarcerated and the mothers, having to deal with the pain of losing your son, I lost my mother during my time of being incarcerated. And so I always thought to myself, like, how it would have been if I could have had my mother there a little bit more, especially in the shape and mold process of my life while I was in prison. And it was something that was very, very profoundly effective, when dealing with how I felt about myself and my relationship with my mother. So, I would just encourage every Black woman who has a Black son, whether, they're incarcerated, whether they're out here in society, just love your son and just teach your sons and your daughters, how to be respectful human beings, so that, a lot of times I have nephews now. I came home and I'm blessed to have 4 nephews. Just last night, I took them to the basketball court, and, because I just wanted to be around them, and I just wanted to show them, the love that they need to receive at this age. A lot of our children are being influenced by music and social media and all these other sources of entertainment where, as they grow, they start to grow apart from us, and then they go out, and these other sources of entertainment become influences of how they start to think. It's what happened to me. It's what happened to a lot of our children, whether rich, poor, no matter your status, because a lot of our children, they want to be accepted into, these circles. But like you said, you have to be careful who you hang with. So to all the mothers out there, continue just to be strong and just to educate your children about what's out there and what could possibly happen, if you make the wrong decisions.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Lawrence. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's continue on that a little bit. We wanted to dive into this because obviously this is a conversation for moms of Black boys. When we started the Facebook group, we can say that we have women from all different sectors, different areas. And one area that we felt and still feel needed some love and needed to have our arms wrapped around them were moms of sons who were incarcerated. Many times we would see them communicate with other moms. It's funny because some of the communication was around when some of our moms would share celebrations for their sons. My son got engaged. He got a new job. Happy birthday to my baby. Congratulations on your college graduation. And we would hear these moms say, congratulations. I wish I could share that same sentiment, but my son is locked up. Or they would say, my son is not here with us anymore. Or they would share sentiments that made us feel as though they felt that though they enjoyed this forum, they needed to be heard as moms who had sons who were incarcerated. They needed to be heard. They needed to be encouraged. They needed to be embraced, and they needed someone to help them navigate and guide the systems that were holding their sons down. And that's when I want to bring it to you, Nadia, because you have been so instrumental in just providing a sounding board for moms who have incarcerated sons. Can you tell us a little bit about, your thoughts and your philosophy on how moms can really support their sons who are incarcerated?
Very, very good question. And thank you, Vanessa. One of the things that I've learned with the moms that I've worked with whose sons and daughters who are incarcerated is the fact that they felt less than. They felt less than, like maybe they were deemed as not a good mother, whether their child made a mistake or, as they like to say, getting caught up in the system. And one of the things is that I try to reassure them is this: because your child is faced with this circumstance does not mean that you are less than a mother. It does not mean that. But what you must do is where you really need to rally around your child. You need to be the voice for your child. You need to be there, prison visits, letters, everything you need to do. That type of support is important. Don't worry about what the naysayers have to say about the relationship or how it went sour with your child and your child got caught up in the system and what have you. None of those things matter. What matters is that you are present in the moment. And what I love about MOBB United is the fact that you guys have opened up this platform to say, regardless of whatever your circumstance of your child is, your child still deserves a win. You've opened up the platform as to whether or not, guess what? We've got incarcerated sons who are obtaining their GED. Thank you, Brother Lawrence. They're obtaining their GED, educational, credentials while they're incarcerated. They're doing a lot of amazing things while they're incarcerated, different programming, things like that. That's going to help them atone, who they are as they transition into society. And so being able to have these platforms it gives them that opportunity to be able to talk about it, to be able to say, hey, you know what? I need another mom in the support group that's going to talk to me like, I feel bad. My child is faced with murder. I may never see my child on the outside. Does that necessarily mean I'm a bad person? So they need that voice to lift them up. Yes, daily I work with moms who are facing with these types of insecurities. And I tell them, Mom, let me tell you something. It's not about that. Right now, your child needs you. And Brother Lawrence can attest to that. And I'm sorry that you lost your mother, Brother Lawrence. And as you know that woman, she still was hurting. She was hurting. She was crying. She was sad. She was miserable. But it also takes me back to, I like to talk about it, but sometimes I don't. During the Trump administration, Alice Johnson, formerly incarcerated, I love her dearly. She reached out to me and she said, hey, Nadia, who you got? I said, wow, what do you mean? She says, hey, we need to get some people out. So we created our own underground railroad to freedom, just like MOBB United. This is our underground railroad to freedom, our underground and our above ground railroad to freedom. And as I always say, you know what? They're killing us in a lot of different ways. Jim Crow, he started in the woods. His grandkids have now taken it to the streets and the courtrooms. We are dying in a lot of different ways. And we've got to figure this out. And having platforms like this and these types of conversations that need to continue, this is important work. And I'm so thankful and I'm so honored for this. But, you know, again, for everyone who is listening and who is a part of this discussion, if you meet a mom whose child has committed a crime or that child is actually incarcerated, please don't turn your eye, because you have no idea what that mother is going through. It takes a lot when your child is incarcerated. It takes a whole lot, because guess what? When your child is incarcerated or your loved one's incarcerated, everyone becomes incarcerated. So please keep that in mind when we talk about these types of conversations. And thank you, Vanessa, for that question. I'm glad we're able to actually address it, because it's important. It's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very important. It's critical. I mean, to your point, we have moms coming from all different circumstances, but we can all attest to the fact that though we may have different backgrounds, though we may have different circumstances, the one thing that brings us here to this platform and the one thing that keeps us bound together is our love for our Black boys, our Black sons, and our desire to see them thrive. That is what keeps us in this fight day in, day out. I want to talk a little bit more about the work that you and Karen do, and Lawrence, you too, because it's such important work. And I feel like, I feel like you guys I call y'all freedom fighters, you know, because I wish I had the intellect and the tenacity to like get in there, dig in there and help some of our brothers out. So praises to you both, to all three of you, for the work that you do in helping our Black sons. But I want to ask you guys, speaking on that, about prison reform, right? And how you are involved in that effort. So yes, we know that you are working on releasing, unfairly sentenced and charged individuals, Black men in particular, out of the system. But in terms of prison reform and sentencing guidelines and the sort, what kind of work do you all do, or what kind of work can we do to impact that area of prison reform? And I'll toss that to you, Karen.
Thank you. First, let me just add to what Nadia was saying about the relationship with mothers of Black boys. I totally agree with her that, we cannot turn our backs on mothers who have sons in prison. And that's why fighting for freedom is so important in society. What I do is I actually wear all these hats. I become mother, wife, girlfriend, significant other, advocate, all kinds of stuff, because when people are incarcerated, what happens is if they don't see, it's like a school teacher. If you don't show up to that parent conference, teachers are going to do whatever they want to do to kids. It's the same thing with prison. If they don't see that you have a loved one that's interested in what they're doing, they want to treat them however they want to treat. So when somebody calls me and tell me that there's an issue with a guard, or where there's an issue with them not even getting out of their cells for 24 hours, I'm on the phone and I'm calling. And that's what these mothers need. They need that type of support. And even like with Deshaun Dye in Ohio, it broke my heart, because he was 17 years old and he committed this offense. It was an accident. His mom put a note on his jacket, send him to the prison, to the police station, and he had to navigate the system all by himself. And so that's why we can't turn our backs on our children at that time. That's the most crucial time that they need. And I literally started doing visits to go see Deshaun, because he had loved ones that were an hour away or an hour and 15 minutes away. And what they thought was, I'll handle him when he get out. But he's in there now 20 years. So I go to the prisons to do these prison visits, because they need that human interaction. So mothers, if you're out there, please don't turn your back on your children, no matter what they've done. They still need that interaction, that touch. And if there's advocates that's out there that want to learn fighting for freedom, we have our website. You're more than welcome to reach out to us, because we'll tell you how you can start to advocate for someone that's in prison. You don't have to be an attorney. You don't even have to have the legal knowledge, but just be even a pen pal, write to them, talk to them, have types of communication that helps. And to go back now to something else that was said, I'm just trying to get everything out, but I'm a mother of 2 Black boys, right? And growing up in an affluential white area or a suburban area, I was so afraid of my own children. And I never allowed them to even play with guns, because I told my kids that when you went out and you were playing with those boys and you had the gun and you were shooting, if a cop came in the neighborhood, just whether it was a toy gun or not, they could accidentally kill you and say, oh, they thought you had a gun. And so those are some of the conversations, like you said, that we have to have with our children. That is so sad that they can't be regular kids. They can't play with guns, because I was afraid that my own child was going to get shot. And so with the legislation, what we do is, we have to be real careful, because we're a 501c3, so you can't really lobby. But we work with organizations like, I'm a contractor for Reform Alliance, and Reform Alliance does policy with probation and parole. And so that's really how I got involved with helping people get out of prison, because we were supporting Delegate Don Scott and Reform Alliance Meat Mill. They did a bill out here to cap the limits on supervised release, because Virginia has this indefinite release. You can be on probation for life. And so we actually work with them. We advocated, we support bills that are coming through that will change sentencing. There's sentencing guideline bills that are coming through. There's second look bills that are coming through. So not only do we do it on a state level, but we also do it on the national level, the federal level, because that's how policies and things will change. So we support organizations that actually write bills, like Cut 50. They're really heavy into policies. And so as the founder and president of Fighting for Freedom, we do get bills. People do send it to us, and then we will do support letters. We'll tack on our name to different op-eds, and we'll sign on and say, yes, we support these bills. But it's very important that as a voter, that you show up for voting when you have judges that are being elected, because you don't want to keep putting these racist judges back into the courtrooms. And so we're very careful how we promote it on social media, but we will support bills. And we do meet with legislators and delegates when we have bills that are very important to us, to talk about why we need those bills to go through the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very informative. I'm definitely, and I think I see some folks in here that are looking for ways that they can help as well. So speaking on this, I do want to ask, Karen, as a collective, how can we, so as MOBB United, how can we help to impact the work that you do?
Yeah, I take a lot of volunteers. And so we have a website called fightingforfreedom.info. And so you can always send me a message, and we get volunteers, again, not necessarily pen pals, but we'll say, hey, we need a person to just write a letter, lift this person's spirit. Or even if we have conversations where we have moms that, like recently with COVID impacting the prisons, there are people that are dying. And so we may try to put someone together just to say, hey, you lost your son, but if you need to talk about it, you can talk about it. But right now, the biggest thing that we need, and my people always tell me I got to start asking, donations help us. Because when we're able to get donations, like Lawrence Stevens is coming out of prison, and we want to be able to hire him and pay him for the work. We're not going to take advantage of him. And so the donations actually help us, because then we can pay someone for writers. But for right now, we're an organization, this is only our second year, and I'm always looking for connections. So if you have a connection to a judge, or you have a connection to a delegate, I'm going to get with Nadia, because she got connection to Miss Alice Johnson. And so those are the types of things that we actually do. And Nadia is going to help me with some connections too. But because how we get our voices out is what we need. And even like social media, if you have people that like the Justice for Lakeith, we're trying to get it viral, because we want more people to know that this young man is in prison for death of a police officer. And the more noise that we make, or when we got involved with Julius Jones, we were able to shut down an execution. And so people don't understand that just reposting or retweeting on social media, that helps spread the word. And it's very collective when, again, Black people unite, because we're not going to watch a state execute an innocent man. And it's been proven with the Julius Jones, he was days from being executed, and social media stopped that.
That's right. Sorry, how many posts, tweets, Instagram pieces that I saw from activists, from Tamika Mallory and Sean King, and you name them, people like myself. Like, you don't have to have a big voice or big following to share a message that can be impactful to other people who have a big voice and a big following, so that they can participate in the fight as well. So 100% agree with you on that. So listen, it goes without saying that the challenges that we're having here, the disparity that we see, is not something that is a case-by-case basis. It's obvious that this is systemic. Our plight as Black people and what we go through, and the disparities that we face, not just in the criminal justice system, but in the educational system and in the medical system, in the mental health areas. There are huge disparities that are systemic, right? But when we're speaking specifically about the criminal justice system, how can we, Nadia, how can we help fight this on an individual basis? So we've heard about, coming in as volunteers, or sorry, not individual basis, but as a collective. How can people organize as a collective to really push the boundaries and force change in this systematic oppression and disparity that we're seeing in the criminal justice system?
Very good question. And I look at it at a larger scale. As I stated earlier, legislation is what rules the nation. If you want to help me with these upcoming elections, learn who these officials are and what they stand for. Speaking about it and just all the optics and all those things mean nothing. Find out what bills have they actually sponsored or co-sponsored. How you find out? Go to congress.gov. It's black and white. They don't lie about that. Type that legislator's name in, or whomever it may be. Find out what bills have they stood for and what legislation that they're talking about, so on and so forth. That is what matters. If you want to help me put those in office that truly are about true prison reform. The reduction of prison reform, the population itself is not, it's more than just a few homeboy hookups. I'm so grateful for so many people who have jumped on board and want to help, like Karen, myself. I love it. It's amazing because there's strength in numbers. However, marches, rallies, they're ineffective. They're archaic. It is that legislation that matters, that's going to reduce this population. Get behind me, learn who you're voting for before you put them in office. I sit on every Biden-Harris committee imaginable. Right now, currently, I have a seat at the table, and I never, ever wanted that. All I wanted to do was make a difference, Vanessa. I remember I had a conversation up close and personal with the former President Barack Obama, and he said to me, Barack Obama, he said to me, Nadia, it seems that you're good at getting them out, but how you been good at keeping them out? I said, because I had to form my own alliance and figure out every barrier that was needed to eliminate them to want to reoffend. If a man can't eat, he gonna steal. I asked, I said, what would you do, President? What would you do? So we had to eliminate every barrier, whether it be from mental health issues, whether it be from employment, whether it be from housing, you name it. And then it started all ringing a bell. You know what, Nadia? You got to dig deeper than this. It's legislation. It is the laws that are locking us up. Even though this is outside of prison reform, Tim Scott, the no-knock warrant, I'm going to leave that right there. So if you want to help me, help you, help us. Learn who you're voting for and what they stand for. Again, congress.gov. Type it in. See what your legislator, what that person, that politician, what they're really standing for.
Vanessa, can I add something in too? And
certainly,
what's the key is retroactive. That one word.
There you go.
everything
There you go.
retroactive. Like I get so tired of all these bills that are coming in that's helping future people, but that's not what's needed. It's the retroactive word to go back in and end that mass incarceration. And I don't know why
Absolutely.
congressional people are so afraid of the word retroactive. They need to put it in there because that's the only
That's
thing
right.
help like a person like Lawrence. If he didn't get a pardon, Lawrence was going to die in prison. He needed retroactive. When you talk about sentencing guidelines, his guidelines was a flat 13 years. And then what locked him in was he took a plea agreement. And so he gave up a lot of his rights to even fight back into courts. And so we have to be knowledgeable. We have to be impactful. And listen, I'm gonna call it out. You have these top organizations that are multi-million dollars, right? And they need to go ahead and start putting some money into the ground workers, feed it into organizations like us, give us some checks. Because if you don't want to do it, we're going to do it. And we're not afraid to go to the governor's office. We're not going to be afraid to go to legislative. We're going to do those hard conversations that political people don't want to have. And so what we try to tell people is that, you know, we're not trying to get rich from this business. What we're trying to do is to get people out of prison. And some of the boundaries that attorneys have, we don't have those boundaries, because I can go and talk to the governor and not be politically correct. I could just say, listen, you got a Black man in prison that is serving a triple life sentence for non-homicide crime. What are you going to do to get him out? If you're on this platform that I'm trying to detract from having these things about me, then you need to make sure that your legacy is you getting Black people out of prison. And we can have those necessary conversations. Those attorneys are not going to have those conversations.
100%. Listen, here's the thing. We can peel this layer one layer down, right? We've talked about how important it is to get involved and into how important it is to vote. We've talked about it from a legislative perspective, but one layer lower, the people who are specifically impacting what happens. Lawrence, you said something really key earlier about the judge in your case.
Yes.
Right. When we are voting, we need to look at those records of those attorneys who are trying to get a seat, right, to hand down sentences. These judges, we got to really get involved from the smallest level, which is truly a big level, because these are the ones that are impacting our lives in our communities and our sons' lives, all the way to the top.
That's right.
It's like you said, Karen, it's like you said, if your child is in a classroom and the teacher sees that you're not showing up to those parent-teacher meetings, this is what this is. They are going to take your kid's life into their own hands and decide to do what they want to do. So we have to show up at every level that we can.
That's right.
With that, I'm going to toss it over to Dipelsha. Dipelsha is going to grab some questions that we've been getting that we want to share with you. Thank you so much for allowing me to moderate this conversation with you all.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Vanessa, and
Thank you,
everyone. This has
Vanessa.
been such a powerful conversation, so many nuggets, and we're going to have to be sure to share it. And we asked our audience to share it widely as well. It's going to be available on our Facebook page, our public Facebook page. Just a few questions. One for Lawrence. What is the toughest struggle for men when released from prison? And what can we do to help them in returning to society from your perspective?
I think, I'm fortunate, to have a strong support system. My sister, my brother, other family members and friends, and Karen and the whole, Fight for Freedom organization. Like I've been truly blessed to have a lot of support. However, I do think that going back, I tend to think about what the process was like, me making a transition from prison. Having a life sentence, I wasn't always made a priority when it came to programming and trade classes and stuff like that. So I think that we should review or further evaluate, how we set up programming inside of the prisons. Because when you take a person who has a long-term offense or a long-term sentence rather, and you tell them just because you have a life sentence, then you're not going to be made a priority for education. So that right there could be damaging to a person's psyche you know, whether it's emotionally, mentally or whatever, you know. So I think coming out, I struggled with questions about how would I make it on the outside, being that I was on the inside for so long and I came in at a young age, you know, so those questions always surface. But, you know, I got out here, I'm making strides every day. I'm living the best way that I can. It's one day at a time. But going back to what Nadia said, what Karen said, you know, it's so important, like, to vote, vote, vote. It's sad because these racist judges and people in those, you know, positions and chairs, you know, they just playing politics with the lives of Black young boys, you know. So I think that, you know, we just have to come together and just do more when it comes to preparing people like myself who had long-term sentences, you know, for making the transition to re-enter into society.
Thank you so much. You sharing your real life experiences going through this is going to help and bless so many people. So just keep doing what you're doing and you'll be blessed for it. Nadia, I want to bring you into this because your organization provides a lot of resources and connects people who are reentering society with resources from housing, education, mental health, financial support. So I would just love to hear how you've been able to put those resources together. Who's been most supportive? Where do you find the most support? And where do you find the most resistance in trying to help people reenter society?
Well, from a grassroots level, just to be perfectly honest with you, is just knocking on doors. For example, where I live here in Cincinnati, there is a huge bakery here by the name of Buskin Bakery. One of the questions that I hold them accountable, you want to employ Black people, you want to employ people, will you employ the formerly incarcerated? You know, forming those types of relationships, holding them accountable, guess what? We're formerly incarcerated, whatever, our money's still green. So if you want our money, can you hire us? Working with organizations like that, holding those mental health organizations like that. For example, we have one here, Community Health Partners. Hey, are you truly treating not only just those that are out, but also those who are actually re-entering to society? So how it's worked for me, Depelsha, is I'm basically knocking on doors, sending letters, phone calls, just asking them, one company, one organization, one person at a time, help us. We want individuals that are re-entering to be able to be successful when they're re-entry. You know, obviously having stable housing, not necessarily in urban communities where there's so much drug activity and crime and violence. We want them to be able to be productive and not having that fear of being in fear of just living, you know, something what is a right for us. So to answer the question, knocking on doors, just asking, soliciting, you know, help. And believe it or not, where I find the most resistance is major corporations, because one, a lot of their employee staff feels in fear. But if you do your research statistically, you will find out those who have been formerly incarcerated, when they come home, they work harder. Because one, they feel like they have more to prove. They work harder and they're more successful. Let's just be honest and true and transparent about it. So that is the biggest resistance that I find, is that it's larger corporations. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't patronize those corporations. If you cannot hire someone who's returning, my money's no good there.
Wow. So you really put it together brick by brick. And you're right. I was on a session at work about this, and JP Morgan Chase and NBC Universal have both invested, made a concerted effort to hire people who were formerly incarcerated. And that's the data they reported. They found that they worked harder because they were so appreciative of the opportunity that they were some of their best employees. So
absolutely,
it is, you know, but it's amazing that you've been able to just knock on doors and put it together piece by piece. And that's what it takes.
Yeah, and so here in Cincinnati, we now have a 95% success with the majority of the corporations outside of Procter & Gamble, which is, you know, the largest corporation here.
Right,
Obviously, it's our headquarters,
right.
That actually have agreed to, they like to state it as hiring returning friendly. So it's been amazing. Like I said, it's just knocking on doors, Depelsha, getting people be a part of the buy-in. You know, like I said, I like working behind the scenes. I like knocking on doors. I like establishing those relationships. They're meaningful to me. They're wins for me, and they're wins for those that are actually coming home, and also those that are hopeful of coming home, that there's support on the outside for them, working for them.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I want to talk to both of you, all of you really, about the power of using your voice. Both of you ladies literally walked up and knocked on the governor's office to have your voice heard, which, you know, that's bold. It takes a lot of courage to do that. So I would just love to hear, like, how did you within yourself get the courage to do that? And how can we empower our moms to have that courage on an ongoing basis? Because honestly, that's what MOBB United is all about. You know, we have the support side to be a resource for each other and to lean on each other and raising our sons. But we also, Karen, we have a 501c3 and a 501c4. So our 501c4, MOBB United for Social Change, is the advocacy arm where we are training and empowering moms to raise our voices collectively on these issues, on issues that matter, and really trying to give them the confidence to do that. One, the knowledge, the data, the information, the talking points, the focus, the areas of legislative focus, but the courage, because at the end of the day, you can have all the paperwork in the world. If you don't have the courage to actually pick up the phone or show up and do it, it all falls apart. So I would just love to hear from each of you how you found that courage and how you can pass that on to others, to not be afraid to take those who are in power and hold them to account.
Yeah, again, Depelsha, thank you for having me. Vanessa, thank you for having me. You got to remember where I came from. I was a school teacher. So, you know, we were used to just making sure that our voices were heard. And I remember when I first started fighting for freedom, because it was so on my heart to get people out of prison. I tell people I'm really shy, but the shyness wasn't going to get people out of prison. So I had to set that aside. And even when I first started, there were people that were doing conferences. This was before COVID happened, right? And I would just go like the Secretary of Homeland Security. You know, I Googled him real quick to find out who he was. And I realized that, you know what, he's on the governor's cabinet. And so what I ended up doing was just going over there and I talked to him. And what I find that really works is giving people compliment, because when you're in positions, all you ever hear about is complaints. And so I thanked him for all that he was doing and how he was running the parole board and how he was overseeing the prisons, and told him about the experiences as a first-time advocate that people opened their arms to me. Then I started to say, okay, well, I realized that you have to get into positions where people would listen. So I emailed the director of the prisons and I introduced him, Harold Clark, and I said, my name is Karen Morrison. I'm an advocate. I'm going to be reaching out to you when I hear things that are not right, but I'll also give you compliments when I do think you guys are doing good things. And so my first email was a compliment on some of the things that I saw with the prisons. And then I could come back in and give a complaint. And what I find is that you have to, don't worry about who these people are. They like you reaching out to them. And I was able to build a relationship with the prison, the director of prison, with the Secretary of Homeland Security, with the parole board chair, because I was always respectful. And so when they saw an email coming in from Karen Morrison, they were like, okay, well, let me see what we could do to help. And that's how, even like with the last situation of Lawrence, he had gotten his pardon, but he was stuck in prison for another 5 months for reentry. But when the virus started spreading again and his life was in danger, we could email the director and say, listen, we know he got a pardon and we know that there's certain protocols, but there's no way that you can do reentry because the people are not even coming to work. And so they were able to activate and connect us to different places and people. And we were able to get him out on January the 12th when Lawrence had another 5 months in prison. So my advice is don't be afraid of who these people are, because they're normal. Like Nadia said, she had a conversation with the president of the United States. They want to feel normal. They don't want to always wear that president hat and be like, oh no, you can't talk, because they're in tune to people in the community and they want real conversations and they want you to be real. Don't sugarcoat anything. Tell them what's wrong and tell them what's you're needed. And that's how I was able to get into spaces where people couldn't get into, because I sent those emails, I made those phone calls, or I showed up to events and I waited when they were coming off the stage. And I'll just share this. Like I had the foresight to see that Governor Youngkin, a Republican governor, was going to win. I don't know how, but I saw it. And so when he had a campaign rally, I went to that rally, right? It was only 5 Black people at the rally, but God put me in a position that when he came off the stage, I was able to speak to him and tell him already what my agenda was. You're not going to come in here as governor and think that you're going to forget about Black people. We need second chances. And Governor Northam was able to grant clemency. At that time, I think it was only like 700, but I'm like, you're going to have to set your record. I think you should go higher than Governor Northam. And, you know, those are the kinds of conversations that you have. And I expect him to do it.
Wow, that's an interesting point of view too, because so often we only reach out to and align with those who we assume have the same ideals and principles and objectives, but you have to engage with everybody who's in power. And both of you have been successful in doing that.
Thank you.
So I want to bring in anything else on that? Because there are just a couple of other things I want to ask you all.
I want to say something.
Okay, go ahead.
Tasha, if you don't mind. You know, as a proud product of Flint, Michigan, my water's never been clean. Environmental racism is real. And I think people need to understand that. It is, you know, and unfortunately and painfully, I had to experience, you know, the traumatic and the psychological and the emotional effects of what incarceration does to my family, my community, my culture, and our economy. I had to see that. And so, and I believe that we all work from the space of compassion, regardless of what our mission is, right? And so I think the most important piece, and when we're talking about what compelled us, what really wanted us to have, I felt like I needed to do something. We all need to do something. You know, being Black, you know, it is our moral responsibility every single day to do something, especially when it's not right. And as it relates to the advancement of our people. And so, you know, and I just wanted to make sure I made that point to you that, you know, working from the space of not only the fact that my brother was incarcerated, but there's so many other brothers that are incarcerated. I can't just sit around and not do nothing. And, you know, there's some that don't mind, that just, you know, like, oh, that's not my problem. But believe it or not, it is your problem. It's all of our problem. Mass incarceration is real. So I just wanted to make sure I shared that point with you. That was very important to me. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to touch on something else that you mentioned earlier, Nadia, which is the mental health aspect and the mental health component of this. So one, the impact that it has on families, you talked about what your mother went through, but also we've heard a stat that from 30 to 50% of people who are in prison have a mental health disorder or are struggling with a mental health crisis. And I would just love to hear your experiences, both of you, on, you know, are there any accommodations for people with mental health disorders in the criminal justice system, and how has that played into your work? Because we recognized early on with MOBB United that it was such a huge factor. So we started out focusing on police brutality and police killings, but quickly realized that was tied to the school to prison pipeline. So now it's education and criminal justice. And in looking at it more deeply, so many of the cases have a mental health component. So how has that been a factor in your work, and does it matter in this system?
It definitely matters. From my level of interaction with the prison reform piece, I find that the mental health services inside the prison system is very, very little or minimal, to at least. I'm going to defer that to Lawrence because I'm sure he can speak on that much better than I can. But from what my work, it's very, very little, Telsha. And so to make sure that my guys are re-entering that I know that have mental health problems, and versus just heavily medicating them. Like I said, I have to get out here and knock on doors and go to different community health partners that can maybe help me. Many of them don't want to treat, or because one, they don't even have insurances, or the government insurances, or, you know, these individuals aren't eligible for them because of their crimes and restitution, things like that. That's a challenge. It's a huge challenge, but I would like to defer that to Brother Lawrence, and maybe he can talk about from the inside, from his perspective of what he saw as far as mental health treatment. Brother Lawrence, I think he's on mute, I think.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just sitting here listening to y'all. And yeah, you know, from being inside, like you said, Nadia, the mental health services there is very, very, very limited. Unfortunately, like I came from an institution or a facility where it was over 1,200 inmates. However, they only had maybe 3 or 4 QMHPs that was actually employed at the prison. So, you know, you look around and you see a whole bunch of men, you know, struggling, you know, with different type of illnesses. you know, and it's just a lack of resources and, you know, a lack of people who we can actually talk to kind of like help us, you know, find our way through the problems and the issues that a lot of us had before we even went there. Because to Nadia's point, you know, environmental racism and a lot of the things that we experience in our communities play a part of the lack of things that we know or don't know going into a system that honestly it arrests your development, you know. So like I said, I struggled early on in my sentence, and when I had issues with, you know, my mental health and things like that, instead of someone coming to talk to me, what they actually did was they kept prescribing me medication, you know, sedating me. So yeah, mental health, you know, and when dealing in the prison system, and even when recognizing, you know, the need for it in society when dealing with our Black children, you know, is very important.
Well, thank you. And is mental health taken into account at all in establishing sentencing, or, you know, in evaluating a case? Have you been able to use that as an argument to gain pardons because someone is struggling with mental health disorder?
Yeah, I actually started using it because Virginia did do great. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Matthew Russian case, where Matthew Russian was, or
Yes,
is
we had him and his mom on in April, actually.
Yes. Okay. So, so what happened with them is that there was a bill that was passed. And so now, as part of what we say in the pardon, like if there is any type of mental issue or even autism that exists, we can use that because the bill is not retroactive, but they now recognize it. We can actually say that if this young man or this person was sentenced today, this would have been a factor. And this is why we're asking for them to consider. Because remember, when you do a pardon, you have to have extraordinary and compelling reasons to grant. And so we can use the changes in the law now should be taken account for someone that was suffering mental illness or a psychosis or breakdown at the time that they committed the crime, and that they should not be sentenced to that long. But I want
That's
to tell you,
great to hear. I'm hoping more states are doing that. I have a son with autism, so Matthew Russian's case was, you know, very near and dear to my heart and really touching for all of us to hear his story. And he came on and spoke about it directly along with his mother. So very impactful. So it's good to see Virginia doing that work, but I don't know if that's universal across the states.
yeah, Virginia did great, and especially with the Matthew Russian case. That was one of the cases too that we advocated for a little bit behind the scenes to help put them in a great position to receive that conditional pardon. But I want to tell you something. Lawrence checked me the other day because, you know, you get so involved in the work, and that because we do advocate for people, I kind of got so lost in trying to build a relationship with the parole board members and just, you know, doing things away, trying to be an executive director to a nonprofit. And he was like, Karen, you got to remember, you started this organization because of a passion to communicate with people that were incarcerated. And I'm getting all these emails, people saying they haven't even heard from you. And he made me remember that, you know what, part of what we have to do is to communicate with the person that's incarcerated, because they're so dependent on you encouraging them and being able to speak to them when they're having like a mental health crisis. And then again, I want to share something with Lauren too, because, you know, once he got out, we have a really special and unique bond. And it was a little time that he was missing. And so I kind of got in my car and was like, yo, where are you? Because, you know, you're so afraid that now that they're out in the real world, that something could trigger or something could happen. And so he had to remind me that, Karen, you got to remember, when I was having a hard time, I would just shut down and go into the hole. And so those are the kinds of things that we have to take into account, that, you know what, they're coming out of prison and they're just not, it's like I was trying to think, oh, well, you've been here, you know, like you should just kind of fall back into line. And that I had to remember that we got him out so quickly that he's still trying to make that transition. And I had to back off and say, you know what, if I don't hear from him, he's okay, and just give him his space. So it's a learning experience for both of us. But definitely I had to kind of check myself and say, you know what, it is so important. And even if I send an email to just say, hey, I'm so sorry, I'm super swamped, but, you know, I haven't forgotten about it, it actually makes their day.
Okay, we just got a question on that. Can emails be sent to the incarcerated instead of letters? Can they receive emails? Okay.
Yes, there's different systems. There's like JPay,
Core
Correlate,
links.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I
Okay.
think like GTL. So there's ways that you can actually add on, and then you can just show up and say, hey, I would like to communicate with you. And they're really receptive.
Mhm. All right, well, let's follow up on that. And my last question, I don't know if Vanessa wants to come back on, but my last question that a number of people have had is resources. What organizations, what websites, what books do we need to read to educate ourselves and be prepared to act and advocate on these issues, including your own organizations, of course?
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, there's certain organizations that are near and dear to my heart, so I'll shout them out. One is the Buried Alive Project with the attorney Brittany Barnett. They're co-founded with Miss Alice Johnson, Sharonda Jones, Corey Jacobs. Like, they do incredible work on the federal level to actually help lifers get out. Reform Alliance, they have tons of resources.
What was the name of it? I missed the
I'm sorry, it's the Buried Alive Project.
Okay, I'm just gonna write it in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, and so they work with federal lifers. And Reform Alliance is an organization that I'm connected to, and they're doing things on the level, like when COVID happened, I love the fact that they were able to raise funds and get the equipment in right away, like masks and hand sanitizers and things like that. And so I commended them for doing that. There's Cut 50. Well, I think it's Dream Corps now, formerly known as Cut 50. Those are organizations that I align with. I call her Miss Lily K, Miss Branch Kennedy. I think hers is RIHD in Virginia, and she does a lot of the keeping you informed with legislation and, of course, fighting for freedom. You just gave me a brilliant idea. I'm going to go ahead and add some of those resources onto my own website so that we can definitely have it up there so that people can reach out to them. One thing about us is that we want to make sure that we shout out organizations that are underground, grassroots, that are really doing the work, because to me, I feel like those are the ones that's really making those changes.
Mm-hmm. And to add to that, none of us can do this by ourselves.
Yes,
which is why we're all here today. As a matter of fact, it's so important that we unify in this fight across the board, not just in prison reform and in, but for our own equality. It's so important that we organize together.
There's strength in numbers, that's for sure.
Nadia, did you want to add to the list?
Absolutely. My own organization, of course, is the Incarcerated Relief Resource Center, IRRC.org, as well as please email me, info@NadiaIsPR, prisonreform.com. I've got excellent resources as it relates to offender-friendly organizations nationwide. They're actually companies that hire for those who are returning. Also, I must make sure that I use this platform, MOBB United, who's an excellent resource at giving out resources. So those three are definitely, and to piggyback off Karen, a lot of the organizations that she mentioned, I'm not necessarily aligned with them, but I'm very familiar with their work. They do amazing work. So I want to make sure that I definitely give them their shout outs as well. So that's it.
Sounds great. And if you can put your email address in chat, I couldn't type fast enough.
Absolutely. No worries. I'll do it right now.
Back to you, Vanessa. Oh, you're on mute.
We definitely know that people want to reach out to you, Nadia and Karen. So thank you guys both so much. And Lawrence, thank you so much. Dipelsha, you started this off with such a strong piece for that video to promote the piece that's coming out on Discovery Plus. I know we don't necessarily have the time to do it again, but could you please share the information so that everyone can watch? Because I know I definitely want to tune in and see that important piece that's being shared. Thankful to Tina Noel, everyone who's worked on it.
Sure, I will. If I had known, I would have had the graphic queued up, but I don't have time to do it now. But first, I just want to thank you all so much for this conversation. It was so impactful and informative and powerful, and just thank you for all that you're doing. And we look forward to staying in touch and following your work and figuring out ways to work together and support you. So I have to say that. Also have to plug next month's webinar. Next month, wow, it's hard to believe it's March. next month, Women's History Month. And we are very excited to have the mayor of St. Louis, Tashara Jones, as our guest speaker. She is a mom of a Black boy and has spoken out about her own fears and concerns in her journey as a MOBB. So please join us. We'll be promoting that soon. And as Vanessa said, we encourage everyone to watch the 4-part docuseries, Profile the Black Man, premiering on Discovery Plus tonight. You have to sign up for Discovery Plus. You can get a 7-day free trial if you don't already have it. But it's going to be airing every Saturday evening. I was trying to see if I have the time. I don't see the time, but since it's a streaming platform, you can probably watch it anytime once it's released. But please tune into that, because it's exactly the kind of narratives we've been trying to support and promote. And we want to reward them for doing this work and making the investment and show that this is the kind of content we want to see. So to do that, or to make more of it, people have to watch it. Vanessa and I both come from the television business. We know how it works. Nobody watches it, they're not doing it no more. That's how it works. So please tune in so that we can encourage them to make more investments in counter narratives to counter all the negative images that the world of entertainment has produced about our men and our sons. So thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
We love you.
Thank you so much.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Lawrence.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.